Shoutout to SneakyPig200 for supporting me on level 3 of Patreon. Hey everyone! I'm Bertil Auris. After roughly 4 years since starting this channel, we have hit 3,000 subscribers on this channel. It's quite unreal just how massive of a gap we've crossed in such a short time, as we only reached 2,000 subscribers 2 months ago, thanks to you guys. So I thought, let's celebrate this milestone with a bit of a special video, ranking every Bowser's Castle in Mario Kart. These types of tracks have been in every Mario Kart game, usually acting as the semi-finale track before the ultimate Rainbow Road. These tracks may not be as iconic as the Rainbow Roads, but it's hard to deny that they're just as much of a staple to the series. So, what Bowser Castle courses will I include in this list? Well, I'm not gonna include any from the arcade games because I have not played them. When it comes to remakes of existing Bowser Castle courses, I will count them as the same track, unless they differ enough to warrant different spots on the list. And I'm not gonna count any Bowser Castle track from Mario Kart Tour because that would just make the video way too long and they're not that interesting to discuss anyways, even if GBA Bowser Castle 3 from that game would obviously be in last place. So those are the rules. So anyways...
Wait, 3,000 subscribers and your video quality is still rubbish? Before I start recording, I say you should start improving your videos. Maybe add some smoother transitions. Maybe. What if we film this video elsewhere? Somewhere that fits your video topic?
Well, that's a great idea actually, Bertil Auris, my artistic sibling. Good thing you stepped up willingly as my cameraman. You're always more creative than me in this department, like when you suggested filming our Booster Course Pass ranking in Sarajevo, to fit the city theme of the obviously city-themed DLC. But now, we're running out of time as I need to get this video up during the weekend.
Oh, don't worry. We can just film your lines while we're on our way to this place. Now, let's hurry up before the plane departs.
Wait, you booked flight tickets without telling me beforehand?
Well, if you're not coming with me, good luck finding another cameraman.
Okay, fine, Kiara. We'll go to this location which, according to you, would fit as a backdrop for my Bowser Castle ranking. Now, let's get the camera rolling. And I think you definitely need a mouth surgery in the future. So let's start this list off with what is arguably the only truly awful rendition of Bowser's Castle in Mario Kart. SNES Bowser Castle 2. This isn't just the worst Bowser Castle, but it might also be one of the worst Mario Kart courses of all time, up there with figure 8 circuits. This course just gets me in a bad mood, no matter what time I play it. So Super Mario Kart and Super Circuit, instead of having one Bowser Castle track, have 3 or 4 different renditions, which on the whole makes the quality vary greatly between the variants, with the 1s and 2s being incredibly lacking and the 3s and 4s instead being incredibly difficult. SNES Bowser Castle 2 is the worst of both worlds. Not even mentioning that the atmosphere is unpleasant with the bland remix of Mario World's Final Battle playing, the layout is just awful. On one hand, you halfway through have a troll path, which can only be barely crossed with a feather, which is incredibly frustrating on first playthroughs, but the rest of the track isn't any better. It's just 90-degree turns on and on after each other with little time to breathe. In fact, the entire track is pretty much just a bunch of 90-degree corners, and when you put them together with barely any space to breathe, it becomes pretty annoying. And with Super Mario Kart's rather slippery controls, you just keep bumping into everything, which is the worst feeling ever. Like, it clearly doesn't feel like it was meant for this game's controls. SNES Bowser Castle 2 is just disgusting. Probably the most needlessly frustrating Mario Kart course of all time. Not much better is the predecessor to it, SNES Bowser Castle 1. Yeah, prepare to see a lot of these flat Bowser Castle tracks near the bottom of this list. Not all of them are bad, but a lot of them are just the same story over and over again. Thankfully, SNES Bowser Castle 1 isn't as brutal as its sequel, as the design is much more forgiving with far less tight turns, more straightaways, and just wider roads in general. Unfortunately, the price to pay is that it becomes as boring as can possibly be. Seriously, there's nothing happening on this track, and it's long too, so it feels like it goes on forever. Couple in the unpleasant music and atmosphere and voila, you got the most boring Bowser Castle track of all time. Well, at least it's not annoying to play, but that's not a high bar to cross. Now this track just makes me sad inside. GBA Bowser Castle 2 in Mario Kart Super Circuit is okay, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about its, remake in Mario Kart DS. So Mario Kart DS is no stranger to taking both great and also less great tracks and then ruining them in the worst ways possible. GBA Bowser Castle 2 being just one of the many victims of this game. The music, which was pretty dangerous feeling in the original, sounds so derpy and so unfinished in this version. It's way too quiet at times, and when it's not quiet, the instrumentation just sounds off like, what's with the piano? There's not much charm in the visuals either. The skybox just looks poorly rendered and depressing now. It's an awful remake. What saves the track is more or less the actually decent level design. There are a few tricky turns and some actually pretty interesting areas, whether it be this bit that has alternate routes or this route with the troll boost pads. It's slightly more interesting than the bottom two, but the atmosphere ruins any potential immersion this track could have had. The weakest 3D Bowser Castle track is from Mario Kart DS. Now obviously, this is much more interesting than any of the tracks we just talked about, since you're actually racing through a castle now, and not just some platforms surrounded by lava. However, despite the potential with 3D, DS Bowser Castle is just kind of bland. The best way I can put it is that it's GCN Bowser Castle, but worse in almost every way. It tries so hard to be that track, from the aesthetic, to music, and even down to the sections. Some turns even feel identical. However, due to the DS's limitations, you don't get the same feel. GCN Bowser Castle was simple, but it worked, thanks to the ominous music complementing the track design. This one is also simple, but the music just sounds weird, which doesn't translate as well to the overall track design. There's one unique section involving a spinning kebab wheel bridge, which doesn't actually send you to your doom if you fall off, but it's not enough to lift an otherwise short and bland course. On the whole, it's just kind of bland and does too little to stand out, unfortunately. Which again is simple and not particularly interesting. Our final subpar Bowser Castle track on this list is Bowser Castle 1. Again, well, not really. This is Bowser Castle 1 for Mario Kart Super Circuit, not Super Mario Kart. On the surface, there's not much to say about this one. Just like SNES Bowser Castle 1, it's pretty easy and doesn't have much going on. What sets this one apart is firstly the music. It's much more dangerous feeling and feels like it has more care put into it, which tremendously improves the atmosphere. Then there's the skybox, which is actually pretty interesting, being set inside of a castle with these massive doors. Super Circuit's individual skyboxes for each track on the whole make a lot of them pop out more than they'd otherwise do. This one is also much shorter than its SNES counterpart, so even though it's simple and forgettable in its layout, at least it goes by quickly. So congratulations, GBA Bowser Castle 1. If only you were a little more interesting to drive on, you could have even been good. Well, at least it's not a bad course. Okay, finally, at last, we've managed to put aside all of the bad and mediocre Bowser Castle courses now. Pretty fitting how it's with the top 10 of this ranking where we finally get to the at least okay Bowser Castle courses. The ones I wouldn't mind playing at all.
Hey, be quiet, Albert, I'm trying to sleep.
Oh, of course. My evil twin brother is here to thwart me again. Wait, why are you here?
Don't ask me, ask Kiara.
What did you do, Kiara?
Oh, well, you see, Boris, you made your brother very angry last month when you kept insisting on using the wrong name for 3DS Rock Mountain.
Maybe because it's called Alpine Pass?
You know he doesn't like that name, and it's unacceptable that you keep bullying him. You have until the end of the video to make your apology. If not, I will delete all footage we've recorded thus far.
Why did I hire you as my cameraman? Opening up the top 10 of this list, we possibly have my most controversial Bowser Castle opinion. Because Wii U Bowser Castle is only at number 10 for me. Apparently, this is one of the most revered Bowser Castle courses. Now yeah, sure, it's edgy and chaotic, but that's not enough to make a good track. Frankly speaking, I was never a big fan of the more exaggerated approach to this version. It tries so hard to be edgy and dangerous with all the mechanical stuff going on, and the hard rock electric guitar echoing, and the lava everywhere, but Personally, I prefer a Bowser Castle where I can actually see what's going on, instead of being overwhelmed by the most irrelevant things possible. And it's a bit comical how hard this Bowser Castle tries to be cool, but the level design is actually not that interesting. Under that gimmicky anti-gravity lies a rather simple design with smooth turns and slow, easy to avoid obstacles. It's really not that interesting in its layout, and combined with an atmosphere that's all over the place, Wii U Bowser Castle just isn't that immersive, and quite frankly, unrealistic to the point that it's not that appealing. Well, at least the layout isn't bad or unoriginal, it's somewhat fine to drive on, but it will never be one of my favorites. Ever. Next up is GBA Bowser Castle 2. This time, the original version, and not the DS remake. Mario Kart DS's rendition of this track was pretty disappointing, which is sad because the original track is actually quite fun to play on. They're pretty much the same track from a layout perspective, but atmospherically it's the clear winner, as the skybox is so much more charming and the music feels much more dangerous. No questions asked. Interestingly enough, GB Bowser Castle 1 had the opposite treatment. Because while the original version was kind of forgettable, its remake for Mario Kart 6 this time was actually quite spectacular. Unlike Bowser Castle 2 and Mario Kart DS, they didn't really ruin anything. If anything, everything is better. The visuals actually look better than on the GBA, and help the track pop out even more, and the music is pretty much just an enhanced version of the original tune. On the whole, this remake is just a lot more atmospheric than it was on the original console, which greatly helps this track feel alive and kind of exciting. It's even better though, because on the section with all the jump pads, a glider pad will open up on the first one for laps 2 and 3, with also an added shortcut at the end of it. So yeah, GBA Bowser Castle 1 in Mario Kart 7, not a bad track at all, but actually a pretty good one. Alright, so we've talked about the GBA Bowser Castle that was originally fun and then boring, and we've also discussed one that started out forgettable, but got a well-deserving glow-up later on. Now imagine if there was a GBA Bowser Castle track that was equally fun in both versions. Well, would you look at that, GBA Bowser Castle 3 fills in on that mark. This track's standout isn't the gameplay. It's actually not that interesting, mostly just being turns in one section consisting of jump pads. What puts this one above the rest, however, is the atmosphere. Unlike the other Bowser Castles in this game, this one is bathed in a beautiful blue color instead of the typical orange, with a blue tile set, but also a distinct skybox that's set outside of the castle during a dark blue thunderstorm, surrounded by the purple castle walls. Really, if the layout was a little more interesting than this could have been easily a top 3 Bowser Castle track. But as it stands now, it's still incredibly charming. And the Wii remake luckily didn't change much besides a game-breaking shortcut, so it will share the spot with the original on this list. SNES Bowser Castle 3 is, disappointingly enough, the only good Bowser Castle course from Super Mario Kart. After the rather boring first variant and frustrating second variant, the third incarnation of the SNES Bowser Castle saga finally manages to find a common ground between the two predecessors. Layout-wise, it's very reminiscent of Bowser Castle 1. In fact, they have the same shape. But while one was wide and long and empty, Bowser Castle 3 consists of tighter turns, thinner roads, and best of all, alternate routes. See, Bowser Castle 1 isn't inherently bad, its potential wasn't just realized until in 3. It's difficult, but unlike Bowser Castle 2, which had a bunch of 90-degree turns right after each other, Bowser Castle 3 has more drastic turns, but with more space in between them, so you get more time to breathe and prepare your drift, which ultimately saves the frustration. So despite the more complex design compared to 2, it feels easier and more satisfying to drive on, thanks to the fact that the layout is more adjusted to Super Mario Kart's controls. Overall, I can't believe I'm saying this, but SNES Bowser Castle 3 is actually pretty great. GCN Bowser Castle was pretty much the Bowser Castle track that came to define what the track would be in the future. It was the first 3D Bowser Castle track to be set as the third track in the Special Cup, and starting from this game, Bowser Castle would be known as the dangerous semi-finale to the game, with the dark corridors, twomps blocking your path, lots of fire and lava. Even the moving Bowser statue had its origin here. And overall, this track works really well. It's a bit on the simple side with no too crazy areas, but it's a good first take on the more lava-infested and typical Bowser Castle setting we all came to love in future games, even if the music is a little more ominous than chaotic this time. In the end though, I think it would be unfair to rank it higher than some of the even ambitious Bowser Castle courses that improved on this one, so it will stay here. Now this is probably one of the more underrated Bowser Castle tracks in the series, 3DS Bowser Castle. Now this is a version I can never really quite decide on what to think about. On one hand, there are aspects I don't really like about it, but then there are sides of the track that I absolutely adore. And sometimes I both love and hate the same thing about it. Did you know that only a third of the track actually takes place inside of the castle? Yeah, everything else is instead set in this ashy wasteland on the outskirts of it. It gives the track quite a distinct feel, partly thanks to the Doomsday-ish music. This Bowser Castle feels kind of more hopeless compared to other versions. The castle itself is a lot more run down, with darker colors on the walls and the flooring just being a simple road instead of an actual flooring. And the outskirts themselves feel post-apocalyptic. It's a really unique take on the Bowser Castle archetype, and the layout is interesting to say the least. It throws a bunch of different ideas all at once. Some work, like the emphasis on alternate routes, and then you get this barrel leading to an underwater section with lava spewing from the ground. What? It's interesting to say the least. It's both an amazing track, but also a bit of an overly gimmicky one, which might explain why I've always switched my opinions around on it. But on the whole, I've still always appreciated the uniqueness of this version. It has flaws, but overall, it's also just a really cool rendition of Bowser's Castle, and I always find myself coming back to it.
Alright, my brothers, we have arrived at our destination.
Ugh, the gravity is so much stronger down here on Earth.
Bertil Auris, why Toff the beach? How does this even remotely fit Bowser's Castle?
Oh, I never said it would fit Bowser's Castle. I said it would fit this video topic.
What are you talking about, Kiara?
You see, Albert, remember back when we were on vacation to Gothland last summer? Well, I certainly remember. It was the last day, and we went here to Toff the Beach, and guess what? Nintendo announced Wave 2, and you couldn't make a video about it.
I only get bad memories from this place.
Now, remember that feeling, but now imagine instead that you have an urge to apologize to your brother for your treacherous behavior.
Bruh, you spent my video budget, not for improving my video quality, but to satisfy my evil twin brother's fragile ego? Whose side are you on, Kiara?
Does it matter? The only thing important here is the fact that I can delete this footage if I wanted to.
Let's just continue on with the video for now. Now it's time to say our goodbyes to the final and best flat Bowser Castle track on this list, GBA Bowser Castle 4. The fact that I put one of the flat Bowser Castle tracks as the third best one of all time might be outrageous in any normal circumstance, but Bowser Castle 4 from Super Circuit is actually just that great. Cut that, it's amazing! It's hard to make a flat piece of cardboard feel intuitive and interesting, but they nailed it here. Sure, the aesthetic isn't that nice crispy blue anymore, but everything else makes up for it. It's by far one of the hardest Bowser Castle stages out there, with tight turns everywhere, a lot of alternate routes, a bunch of lava pools just chilling, and boost pads. It sounds anticlimactic when I say it, since almost all flat Bowser Castle tracks have that, but this one manages to combine it all into such a difficult yet satisfying experience. Just look at the map for yourself. There's even one big jump, and even though the glider wasn't invented yet, this is one of those few times in pre-Mario Kart 7 where I feel like I'm gliding across a dangerous road patrolled by these Mecha-Koopas. The dangerous vibes are only amplified by the skybox. What is this thing? It looks so complicated and so sinister, and it tells you this is not like the previous Bowser Castles in this game. What an amazing track overall. And barely losing first place on my ranking, we have the ever so iconic Wii Bowser Castle. Now this track is the definition of kingly. Whenever you try to imagine a Bowser Castle track, this is probably the one that comes to your mind first. And it's no surprise why, as it took the formula established in the GameCube version and amplified it by a million. It's absolute chaos, both in the atmosphere but also in the level design. Whether it's the start with the shaking corridors, the incredibly sharp turns, or the Bowser statue spitting fireballs, forcing you to take a risky half-pipe. And that's not even half of the track. And despite all of the chaos and difficult level design, it still feels cohesive. The castle has a really charming aesthetic, making you feel like you're in a majestic castle. And even at its craziest extent, Wii Bowser Castle still feels like a real castle level Bowser could actually live in. as opposed to say Wii U Bowser Castle, which is all over the place and doesn't try to be cohesive. Wii Bowser Castle is simply the perfect mix between absolute chaos and masterful world building. And that's not mentioning how the music is a slowed down and distorted remix of Maple Tree Away, which also adds so much potential lore and personality. It's a wonder how this track isn't my favorite, but there's actually one more Bowser Castle that's even more interesting. N64 Bowser Castle. Even after 8 games in the Mario Kart franchise, my favorite is and will probably always be Mario Kart 64's Bowser Castle. Ironic because Mario Kart 64 on the whole has a pretty unpolished track selection. But this course, where should I even start? Wii Bowser Castle might have nailed the balance between chaos and realism, while N64 Bowser Castle focused on just the realism aspect, and honestly, they went so incredibly far with it that ultimately, they created a Bowser Castle unlike anything else. This one is much more quiet, much more ominous, more real. You don't have that typical edgy cobblestone pathways here with lava spread all over the place. This one feels more like a real castle, with massive chambers, red carpets, courtyards, etc. There is still lava, but only at a few sections, so whenever it does show up, it suddenly feels so much more dangerous than if it had been everywhere like in other games. This Bowser Castle almost feels like an adventure with how long it is and how it slowly progresses from getting chased by thwomps as you enter the castle, as you race through courtyards and then make your escape as fire geysers are trying to hinder you. It's hard to describe just how immersive and how realistic it feels. No other Bowser Castle track made me feel as much within me as this one. And that is why it will always be the best one, especially since none of its future successors tried to replicate the feeling this one had.
Okay, that was the last of your lines. Now, this is the part where we delete all of the footage.
Okay, fine Bertil Auris. Sorry for calling it Alpine Pass. From now on, I will call it...
Say it!
Alpine Pass. What's that?
Huh? Hey!
You'll never hear me calling it by the forbidden name. Now see ya!
You have no right, Boris! After him, Bertil!
Alright guys, I think I managed to outrun them, so I bought a one-way ticket to the Swedish mainland so I can then catch a flight back up home. I can't believe Bertil Auris was a double agent working for my evil twin brother. But now I can at least finish up the video, and overall, that was my ranking of every Bowser Castle course in Mario Kart. But what is your ranking? If you like this video then please make sure to like, share and subscribe to my channel, as I talk about everything Mario related. With all that being said, I'm signing off.